You want to join again, or are you good? You can join if you want to. Okay. Okay, we're ready to go then. Thank you.
Okay, so we are calling to order our budget meeting for the Butte Falls School District number 91. It is Monday, May 2nd, 2022 at 6:19 p.m. Do we need to roll call or anything? Looks like introductions.
Yeah. Do a roll call.
A roll call.
Mark Carlton.
Dan Murphy.
Katie Misfelt. And unfortunately, we don't have any community members with us today. So number 3 on the agenda is election of a budget committee presiding officer for the meeting. Is anyone
So
interested
from the three
in?
of you, we need to nominate someone to run the meeting. You would have to be a board member at this point.
At this point, we don't have a community to elect.
Yep.
So,
I nominate Katie.
okay. Thank you, Mark. Do we have a second? Who wants me to run the meeting, Dan? Is that okay?
Yeah,
You second that?
maybe.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 And so number 4 on the agenda is presentation of our proposed budget for the 2022-2023 budget.
Board directors and our community watching out there. I'm pleased to share the budget message for our proposed 2022-23 budget message. May 2nd, 2022 to the Jackson County School District 91 Butte Falls Budget Committee. Thank you for investing time in support of the budget approval process for Jackson County School District 91. Here is the recommendation. This evening, you are receiving a proposed budget for 2022-2023. It's a budget that attempts to rebalance our revenue and expenditures in order to promote restoration of our regular school year program. It anticipates our enrollment will remain flat with an enrollment of 175 students while maintaining current staffing levels. It's a budget that leverages grant funding streams to maintain the investments we've made in quality instruction staff and instructional tools to improve the opportunities for our students' learning. It is a budget I encourage you to approve. As we begin yet a third year impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic, social, and political effects thereof, whereas years ago we built a budget based on an enrollment of 215 students, we are ending this year with a daily average enrollment somewhere around 180 or so. We've leveraged federal funds to backfill our current budget and have not filled some open positions. This budget anticipates refilling our school principal position, our facilities manager position, and several teaching and educational support positions that have opened due to retirements and resignations. Reflecting on investments from the current school year, the district successfully reopened to on-site learning this past September. With firm COVID-19 mitigation strategies in place, we were able to remain open except for 2 snow days until the second week of January. A large outbreak of COVID-19 cases in the school resulted in 2 weeks of distance learning. Since then, we were able to keep our school open while working with families who experienced COVID-19 at home. Our enrollment has been slowly rebounding from a low of 162 on the first day of school after Labor Day to about 190 on April 30th. Actually, it was 190 on April 30th.
Good.
Our sports partnership with the Prospect School District lay dormant for much of last year due to COVID restrictions, though a few of our high school students were able to play football at Prospect. Our middle school programs have rebounded much more robustly in football, volleyball, boys and girls basketball, wrestling, and track and field. That bodes well for the coming year. The 4th year of our partnership agreement with Southern Oregon University brought more college students to Butte Falls Charter School Natural Resource Center campus, where they developed on-site research projects. Grant-funded curriculum projects resulted in regular visits by our elementary classes to the NRC. With the completion of our outdoor pavilion, we now have 900 square foot outdoor classroom available year-round. The large bioswale project is planted and finishing touches are being put on the pathway across it. The large parking lot by the pavilion is nearing completion as gravel is spread and compacted. The bioswale will capture and filter contaminants that may come from cars parking at the NRC. This spring, footings are being poured for the first of 3 ADA accessible pedestrian bridges that will cross Ginger Creek, connecting a new trail system on that campus. Bridge construction will follow soon. While this has been yet another year of unpredictability and instability that no one could have imagined, the response by employees, students, and families has maximized stability and predictability. We're finding our way back to viability. A budget that supports the district mission. This proposed budget relies on the most recent official state K-12 revenue projections as the funding basis for ongoing operational costs. Even in the face of impending revenue changes, we remain committed to protecting our programs in support of the district mission. Our mission is to create successful, productive, and literate citizens who will be ready for college and/or the workforce by learning collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking through natural resources. To accomplish our mission, we must continue to strategically align and calibrate our funding resources to provide a safe, supportive learning environment with sufficient staffing and tools for our students need to succeed. Budget assumptions. This proposed budget is based on several important assumptions about school funding and enrollment. 1, the statewide base funding level for K-12 education has remained stable, with 49% of the funding being distributed in the current year and 51% being available in the coming year. This helps account for increases in most roll-up costs, contract, salary, wage increases, insurance, PERS, utilities, supplies. With this level of funding, the district can only maintain our current programs for 1 more year. We must increase our enrollment substantially this year in order to sustain our current service level in coming years. 2, our district will at least maintain its current enrollment level. If we are to see any enrollment growth, our hope remains in the hands-on real-life learning experiences that we provide to students when they're on our campuses. This budget anticipates on-site learning only. We will not continue our temporary distance learning option for students who were hesitant to return to in-person learning this year. After a 2-year hiatus, we are proceeding with a marketing plan to reintroduce our school to the Upper Road region, Trail, Shady Cove, Eagle Point, and White City, and our open house will occur on May 12th. Over 5,200 families have received information about our school and are invited to our open house. We still have capacity within our current staffing and facilities to accept more students, especially at the secondary grades 8 through 12 level. 3, strategic investments in the further development of the Butte Falls Natural Resource Center, associated efforts by our instructional staff to integrate this theme into our curriculum, and ongoing communication with the region about the benefits of our charter school program will continue to attract new students to our district. 4, we will proactively add additional staff and instructional materials when fiscally possible to respond to any excessive enrollment growth we may experience. That's optimistic, isn't it? If we have excessive growth. Providing sufficient academic support is essential as we add new students. 5, we will continue to work to ensure sufficient reserve funds to provide for regular planned curriculum adoptions and facilities maintenance. Having up-to-date instructional materials and technology in quantities sufficient for all students will increase learning quality and efficiency. This being stated, as per state directive, we have chosen to delay any consideration. Actually, this is not true. This is error. We are moving ahead with our curriculum adoption for English language arts for grades K through 8, but we're delaying it for high school for 1 year. Upgrading security measures are important capital improvements that enhance the safety of our campuses. Ensuring funds for roof, flooring, and lighting replacements extends the usefulness of our facilities for many years. Revenue. The state school fund. At this point, the revenue assumptions from the state school fund reflect the current anticipated funding level at the $9.3 billion for the biennium. A year ago, that was 9.1, so it's been adjusted. We anticipate using the federal emergency funding to augment our program of temporary support as needed. We recommend approval of this proposed budget, as that approval, along with the adoption by the school board, would provide the authority to expend up to those funding levels. Additional revenue, student enrollment. We anticipate any increases in revenue beyond the state school estimate will come primarily from any increases we might experience in our enrollment. Expenditure increases and investments. Projected wages and salary increases. Our primary method for delivering teaching and learning is through the work of our teachers and support staff. Employee compensation costs comprise about 2/3 or 67% of our budget expenditures, which makes this expense the largest non-discretionary item in the budget. Increases in our classified employee costs for the coming year are predictable because we will be in the third year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement. We will be negotiating with our licensed employee association in the next 6 weeks regarding wages and health insurance benefits and anticipate that process will be resolved within the budget limitations of this proposed budget. We anticipate a successful resolution of that process before the end of June 2022. Public employee retirement PERS increases. PERS costs are an ongoing concern as the state and each district holds an unfunded pension liability for future payments. Because of the increased unfunded liability costs of the state PERS program, all public entities must prepare for additional increases in retirement contributions. These increases are intended to more fully fund this required pension program over the next decade to ensure its solvency. This budget maintains a set aside in reserves to account for increases that likely will come in the near future. Health insurance costs. This budget includes increases in the funding for health insurance benefits as required by our collective bargaining agreements with our classified and licensed staff. Staffing allocations. The proposed budget includes some adjustments to staffing allocations based on the needs of the district. This budget maintains existing permanent positions along with the following adjustments. While we're not adding any regular classroom teacher positions to this budget, we currently have 3 existing licensed teaching positions and 1 administrative position that are open due to retirements and resignations. We are recruiting for these positions. Teaching technology materials. The proposed budget includes funding for the replacement cycle of Chromebooks. It also maintains our current subscriptions for instructional software and the costs associated with migrating to our new student information system. That process is pretty much finished, but we have training that comes along with it. Food service. This budget includes a transfer of funds to cover the subsidy provided by the district to allow all students to receive free breakfast and lunch. Transportation. This budget maintains the current transportation service level. We are not buying any vehicles this year. Safety. There are several safety-related items that are not included in this proposed budget. These are listed below under priorities for future investments. Reserves. This budget proposes set-asides for future needs. These include the following: $100,000 contingency, $230,000 unappropriated. So here are priorities for future investments. Below are items that remain as high needs but are not funded within this proposed budget. 1, increased digital monitoring through video cameras at the bus barn, the NRC, and the district office. Estimated cost $20,000. Improvements to the playground area at the elementary campus. These include additional signage and striping to help guide student play. Estimated cost to be determined. Repair or replacement of walkways at the high school campus and at the district office to reduce tripping hazards. We are working to have this occur at the elementary campus this summer in conjunction with the seismic project. Estimated cost to be determined. Additional reserve funding for larger capital improvements to ensure roofing, flooring, and lighting replacements occur on a reasonable schedule along with other such large maintenance investments. Recommended annual amount increase would be $25,000. This budget doesn't include that increase. Additional reserve funding to provide for scheduled technology upgrades, recommended amount $20,000. Additional reserve funding for textbook adoptions on the state recommended cycle, recommended annual amount $20,000. Provide an outdoor covered area for students at the high school between and adjacent to the main academic building, the tech arts area, and the gymnasium. Estimated cost to be determined. And provide an outdoor covered play area for students at the elementary campus for all weather use. Estimated cost to be determined. Over the past 2 decades, our district has persevered in the face of many challenges. Through all of these, our progress is continuous when we persist. We now face the economic impact of a worldwide pandemic and a major military conflict in Europe. We will work together to make the necessary adjustments to this budget as our revenue projections become clearer. While this proposed budget moves us 1 year forward towards a healthier, safer, more robust educational program for our students and their families, we must remain committed to working together with our employees, our students, families, and our community to ensure Butte Falls Charter Schools remains a healthy, safe place for all. Thank you for your consideration of this proposed budget. Sincerely, Dr. Phil Vila, Superintendent.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Had a lot of detail there. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll go on to 4B, the financial review. Ms. Rachel Aiken.
So you each have a copy of the presentation, but it'll also be up there if you want, or you can follow along on this one right here. What is a budget? As a reminder, it's a financial plan for the coming year. It includes estimates of revenue, which is on your budget document as considered resources. And it includes estimates of expenditures, which on your budget document are called requirements. Again, this is a plan that we established in April of the previous year for the following year. Sometimes we set a path, but have to go off that path sometimes, but we will wind up in the same spot in the end. But just remember that it's a plan that we try to follow, but as things come up, there are some adjustments that could need to be made. Your roles and responsibilities as a budget committee member is to receive the budget message and the budget document. You all have a copy of the budget message and the budget document, and then the budget document is also online if somebody would like to look at it, and the budget message will be posted later this week. It allows us to provide members of the public an opportunity to ask questions about and comment upon the budget document. There is no public here in the building, and I don't think we received any feedback via the email. Okay. The budget committee can make changes to any line item in the budget to meet the goals of the program outlines. The budget committee cannot change staffing levels, salary schedules, or negotiate salary contracts. You can approve the budget document and refer it to the school board for adoption. At the end of the meeting, you can make that motion, or we can meet again if need be. After the presentation, we'll have some discussions and then make motions. So yeah, these are kind of hard to see. I tried to make it good. Okay. Budget funds. So this is just a breakdown of how we look at our funds within our budget. So you have the general fund, which has the most flexibility that we can move and do things within that fund as needed. The special revenue holds our grants, our student body, and any reserve funds that we have. Those special revenue funds are dog-eared for certain things. So when we spend grant money, it's based on the grant budget. Our reserve funds are based on what we've put those funds set aside for. So those are dog-eared for those specific purposes. Your capital improvements funds are used to acquire, construct, and or renovate any major capital facilities. So anything that is considered a capital project would go under that particular fund. And then we have an unemployment reserve, which we established last year, and it's used for the sole purpose to collect a portion of payroll and set it aside to pay our unemployment tax. So we have a specific fund set aside that we put money into from everybody's payroll that we use to pay our unemployment. In the diagram above, you can see that our general fund, the amount of that fund is $4,251,744. It's 67% of your budget. Our special revenue funds hold from Fund 200 to 299. It's $1,772,726. It holds 28% of your budget. Our capital improvements is $297,500. It holds 5% of your budget. And then our unemployment is $19,200, which is less than 1%. This is all of the funds broken down individually. So within that previous slide where we had the individual, where we had the 4 components, now these are all of those components in detail. I won't go into this one too much. This just shows you the name of the grants, the fund number, and the dollar amount associated within that particular fund. If there's one that you have questions about, I'm more than happy to go into those. They are labeled as whatever grant and or fund, like 298 is our reserve fund and 299 is our PERS fund. So the 299 holds the money that we have for the PERS increases. The next slide is your general revenue fund or general fund revenue. So this shows you where our revenue comes from in the general fund. Our general fund comes from usually 4 sources. You have your local sources, which include any taxes, property taxes, any interest that we receive on our pool accounts, or we do not receive any in our checking account, but we do on our pool account. Intermediate sources, that includes common school fund, which comes from the county. State sources is our state school fund and any of our grants that we get through the state. And then federal sources comes from any grant funding. And you can see in the diagram, it will show you, you can see state school fund is the largest portion of our revenue. And then our beginning fund balance that we're carrying over, anticipated to carry over into next year, and then our taxes. Since we've had fluctuation in our enrollment, I wanted to show you a diagram of what that looks like in comparison to revenue. So I've pulled from 15-16 all the way up to anticipated 22-23. You guys can't see it on yours because I believe I did yours in black and white, but on this screen we have the green is the enrollment. The light blue is our ADMW, so that's our weighted average daily membership. So that includes the percentages that we get for SPED students, for poverty. There's a couple of different variations that go into the weight. And then the skinny blue line that runs across this top, it shows you how our state school fund money comes in based on those 2 factors. So you can see as you get closer to the 22-23, we reached a peak in the 2021 year, and then we've started to drop in 21-22 and 22-23. I just was trying to show what the ADM and the state school fund, how those 2 look in correlation to one another. Because I can give you numbers, but sometimes those numbers are just numbers. So this kind of gives you a visual of what that looks like. The next slide is general fund expenditures. So these are all the different categories that we put into the general fund. So you have salaries and benefits, purchased services, supplies, capital outlay, dues and fees, any transfers, contingency, and unappropriated funds. So we will go into each one of those components. So you can see what goes into each one of those. And then if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. So personnel is our first expenditure. It is 67% of our overall budget. You can see that the salaries anticipated in general fund only. This does not include any individuals or positions that we have encompassed in grants. This is just strictly general fund. It's $1.7 million, and the benefits with that is $1.1 million. So our total in general fund is $2.8 million for our personnel. Benefits include everything from PERS to health insurance. If somebody has a health savings account, that's included. Those are the types of benefits that are included in that $1.1 million. The next slide is the personnel information for the coming year. So our current staffing numbers will remain the same. So every position that we currently have now will go into the next year. We're currently working to fill vacant positions, which we currently have some teaching positions, we have some administrative positions, facilities, and now an IA position, I believe.
Yes.
We will continue to use grant funding to utilize and hire any temporary or at-will staff that we may need. The ESSER funding allows for us for COVID response to be able to add additional bodies if needed. We've moved some funding around based on current employees and duties. We moved current ESSER funding. That's actually no longer. I have actually changed that. So I forgot to take that line out. So scratched that we did the 50-50 split because we did not do the 50-50 split. I had to go back and take that out. We do not have a 50-50 split. They are all remaining in ESSER as they are now. We have added, we've changed a regular maintenance to a facility supervisor, and then added a part-time maintenance worker. So after conversations with Dr. Long, it was determined that a facility supervisor was needed more so than just a regular maintenance person. And then somebody to help that maintenance or that facility supervisor. So we added a part-time maintenance worker in this particular budget. We talked about the Oregon Family and Medical Leave Act last year. They put those dates on hold last year. So actually the current budget that we're in, those funds did not get utilized that we had set aside, which is when you look at your board report shows your salaries and benefits is lower. And this is part of that reason because they moved these dates for the Oregon Family and Medical Leave to go into effect in January of 2023. So you can see effective 1/1/23, employers are to start withholding 40% of the required contribution. And in September of 23, employees can begin to use the benefit of the Oregon Family and Medical Leave. The PERS contributions remain level this year. However, I have heard upwards of 8 to 10% next year in the next biennium. So we do have a set aside for that with anticipation of that, that we will continue to monitor as we hear what that looks like as the next biennium gets underway. We are doing a 0.5% of payroll to, so everybody's payroll, a 0.5% of their payroll will go into that unemployment costs for solely for the purpose of paying anybody who goes on unemployment.
Is that something new? Or-
We did it last year.
I remember seeing payments to employees for
Mhm.
unemployment.
To employees or to the employment tax department.
Those to the employee.
It would not have been to the employee.
Okay.
The employment department would pay directly and then we pay the employment department.
We fund what they pay.
Yeah,
On an as needed basis.
whenever they claim that.
Okay.
So there are certain rules behind school employees because we tell the employment department when our breaks are
Right.
so that people can't claim unemployment
Mhm.
because we're saying, yes, you still have a job. We're just taking this time as a break.
Right.
Usually what happens is that you have coaching positions that file for unemployment, even though it's a temporary position. You could have an employee who has multiple jobs and is laid off from one job and is collecting unemployment. Well, because their salary encompasses all of that during that time, we wind up having to pay a portion of that.
But it's, if I understand it right, previously it was as needed. Now it's just gonna go into a reserve periodically. Or is it still as needed?
Nope, this is every payroll, every month, and we did this 21-22 year. We have been doing that.
But it was new, wasn't it?
This, yeah, for 21-22.
That's what you're
I'm
Yes.
thinking it was probably a couple years ago.
Yeah, so 21-22, we started that unemployment of everybody's, a portion of their payroll. We take and put it into this reserve account. And I can tell you that we have paid unemployment for out in excess of what we've collected.
So I'm looking at this expenditures by category and I have salaries and benefits.
Mhm.
And if I put benefits over salaries, it's 63% of what we pay in salaries, we pay in additional benefits then. Does that make sense?
So you're saying for every
we
dollar you
spend
pay 63 cents?
in total in benefits.
That sounds about right. It's,
Okay.
Yeah, it varies. Yep.
So
So for every dollar you pay an employee, 63% or 63 cents goes.
our additional
To
costs that we
benefits.
have, whether it's PERS or insurance or all those things.
Taxes. Any questions on that part of it?
Just a question, Rachel.
Sure.
Now, in our last or the previous meeting,
Mm-hmm.
we appropriated some very large sums of money in the contract to extend to make our elementary area safer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that going to show in the 800,000 carryover, or is that in addition to?
Those funds have not been expended, so it will come, part of it will come out of that 800,000. I have another slide that will actually touch on that later. Those additional funds, that we approved for.
Because we move different funds into.
Yeah,
So is that not part of this budget though?
it is.
So it's not part of the 800. No, it is part of the 800. for
Yeah,
supplement.
so the 800 will get dispersed out.
Yeah. Yep, okay, now I
Yep.
understand Dan's question.
So we'll roll the 8 and then we disperse it out.
All right, thank
Okay.
you.
Mhm. The next category is your purchased services. So this is the 300 series. So if you're looking at your budget, it's those little numbers that say 300 as the object code. The total expenditure in general fund is 427,872. It comprises 10% of your overall budget. It includes things such as ESD business services, which is my position. It includes your HR services, SPED services that we do through Southern Oregon ESD, any legal services that we need to have provided to us, utilities, marketing, things like postage, travel, any trainings, audit services, sub-services that we use through EduStaff. Actually, you guys are not through EduStaff yet. You are through Southern Oregon ESD. And then like things like our copy machine lease go under this purchase services. So anything that we are purchasing as a service goes under this category. The next category is supplies and materials. So it comprises 6% of your overall budget at 241,800. This includes things such as computer software, classroom supplies, hardware, maintenance supplies, custodial supplies, athletic supplies, that all comes under the supplies and materials. So this is the 400 series object code in your budget. I can tell you that these numbers, with having COVID in play, it's become a little bit more of a challenge to find an average. So a lot of these have been very similar for the last several years because of not being able to get an average and or knowing that we have dropped in some things and higher in other things. So these ones remained pretty steady. Your capital outlay, I just said $5,000 for this. It's very minimal. It's less than 1% of your overall budget. This is basically just saying if we need to purchase something that's over and above $5,000, has a larger life, that's considered a capital outlay. We have money set aside for that. We've talked about purchasing a trailer for the maintenance truck to be able to move items from the bus barn, from district to district, or from building to building. We have not done that yet. So
And get our mowers to the ground and
Yep.
service and all.
You have a pretty nice trailer. You can pull it around and work. Is that yours?
I fall in line up here.
Yeah.
Cleaning up a few messes.
the next one are dues and fees. I had to put in a cute little meme there. It says just a friendly reminder that you still owe me money.
I thought that was adorable.
So it's just saying we owe these people money, so we have to pay these items. So Insurance is one of those. I had been told that there was a 10% increase at the time that I was preparing this budget, but I've been told that that's dropping down. I think it'll be between 5 and 8, but this budget anticipates a 10%. It includes bank fees, athletic dues. So athletic dues include things like and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know I'm gonna get it wrong. So we're in like, I don't want to call them as leagues. Thank you. I was gonna say associations, but that's not it. So we have, the middle school has a league, the high school has a league. So that's what those athletic dues are for. Sometimes some of the competitions that the children participate in also have fees associated with those. So
And then rough pass.
Yeah. Yep. So that's goes into that. And then any extracurricular dues. So any additional programs. At one time we had chess club and we had the speech debate. So that extracurricular dues and fees are what falls under that extracurricular. The next one is transfers. So the transfers is saying that we are taking money from the general fund and we're dispersing it to these other particular buckets. So the one on the left is where we take the general fund. We're going to move $372,875 into capital projects. And that is to come up with the elementary projects that we had already approved on before. It's also moving $40,000 to the NRC. So that should start to dwindle as the projects start to wrap up. But we have NRC is in its own fund, so we can monitor how those funds are being spent and how those projects are happening. So we just move money from the general fund to the NRC fund. I could put it in general fund, but it's much easier to identify NRC on its own component if I have it in its own fund.
It also allows us, when we apply for grants, to show district contribution.
Yes. Yep.
Which is many times a requirement.
Yes, especially for those grants, Oregon Community Foundation and a couple of different ones, they like to see those. And then the old food service, because we offer every student free and reduced breakfast and lunch, or excuse me, free breakfast and lunch. We have to move money into food service. We monitor food service regularly. I'll do another analysis here pretty soon for this last year. But because we offer every student and we don't get back 100% from the state, we have to compensate for that.
This year, we run into access or supply chain. of
Supply chain.
commodities And had to go to other vendors or other sources.
Supply chain is a huge thing right now. And it all comes down to, it could be as simple as they can't get the plastic to box the applesauce, or like it's amazing to me what one of the other districts was talking about chicken. They couldn't even get chicken because they couldn't put it in a package. They didn't have the materials for the package, so they couldn't package the chicken to get to the school. He's like, put it in a paper sack and get it here. I don't get it. Yeah, so those are the types of challenges that food service is running against right now. It's a challenge.
So during COVID, when we were delivering food, was the state reimbursing us for 100%?
I don't know that it was 100%, but what they were doing was we were using federal funds to help keep things going.
Yeah, so, and it comes down, and this is why we do the food service analysis. So we say we serve 2,000 meals. Let's say we'll use lunch as an example. We get reimbursed at $2. If we are building our lunches at more than $2, then obviously we have a gap. So hence the reason why we do the food service analysis, and I watch what costs we have and how much it's costing us to make those types of lunches, because we're only getting $2 back. But if it's costing us $3 or $4 to make those lunches, then we are compensating that $1 to $4 or $1 to $2 difference.
I was under the impression the state only reimbursed us for certain students, depending on their financial.
Not at our district, because we have, it's called a community eligibility program.
Okay.
So we do paperwork, Julie does paperwork, that makes all of our students be able to have free breakfast and
Oh.
lunch. There are other schools that go on free and reduced, and they have to, each individual family has to complete an application. And then then it gets sent to the state, and the state says you get either free or you get reduced, or, but we have, as a district, elected to do it as the community eligibility.
So the reason it's not necessarily because we want everyone to have a free lunch, it's because we want everyone to have more food than the state is willing to pay for.
No, not necessarily. We're still obligated to provide based on the state guidelines. But again, if we have, as commodities and items are increasing in price, well, the state's not increasing their reimbursement for us. So if it costs us $5 for a loaf of bread now, where before it was $2.50, well, we're not getting that additional money
Well, we've had this for years, this out of pocket.
ever.
thing
Mhm.
that we've been doing.
And actually, we didn't always transfer enough, so it grew to a big
Mhm.
obligation. So we tried to clean that up this year. didn't we?
Last year, I think we're actually in the breaking even to where we're not rolling over any negative amounts.
Okay,
It used to be,
misled.
yeah, it used to be up to 75,000, even 100,000 at some point. So to me, $60,000 looks really good.
I remember having discussions on having to track
Mhm.
who qualifies and who doesn't. It's just cheaper to make sure everyone gets it.
Mhm.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
fixated on this.
Yeah.
Some
Yep.
Like
students-
when Becca was little, I remember
Yeah.
doing that, yeah.
Okay.
And then the other transfer that we're going to do is, so we have some money sitting in a reserve account for capital projects, and we're going to move $97,500 out of that reserve to help support those elementary projects that we have already approved as a board. It will leave $100,000 in that reserve account for anything that we would need to do later. We still have some money set aside if something were to arise and we would need to take care of it. We would still have money available to use.
That would be the contingency. that
Nope.
You're talking a special.
I am talking
Reserve.
special reserve account. Yep,
Okay.
yep. When I had conversations with Dr. Long, I told him I wasn't willing to give him all of that money to do the elementary project. So we would have to find other sources.
So now you know why the business manager works for the board and not the superintendent.
So if something were to happen, we do have some money set aside that we could, yeah, I mean, if something were to happen, we break a pipe or something were to happen, we have some money to be able to fix it right away and we wouldn't have to wait. I mean, if a pipe broke, obviously we're gonna go for insurance, but
But we can go ahead and move ahead and get it done.
yes, so we do have money set aside if something were to happen. So on top of all of those components, I do have an additional $100,000 for contingency. So what contingency is only requires a board action for me to be able to use. So if some freak thing were to happen and I needed that extra $100,000 to use in, let's say food service. So let's say the commodities and stuff just go way beyond our reach. I could go to the board and say, hey, I have this $100,000 that I need for you to approve for me to use in this other format. By putting it in that contingency, it allows me to only have to go to the board and it doesn't have to, I don't have to go out and do public notices. I don't have to call the budget committee back together. It just allows us as a board the flexibility to make that move right then.
But it is done in a public meeting, so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
transparent.
Yep, it is, yeah. The unappropriated funds are saying that I'm going to, I'm not using any of that money. It's 230,000. The only way that we can use that money is to do a supplemental budget. So in essence, that $230,000 would be your ending fund balance in the general fund. So,
It could be tapped in the subsequent year.
And that's part of the 800,000 then?
Yep.
Okay.
yep. So some key highlights and some other funds that we have going on. So ESSER, so we are going to be using our ESSER funding. So normally I don't touch on any of the grants, but I wanted to be transparent so that everybody knew, because we have all this additional funding that's coming in. I wanted you guys to be able to see what that looked like. So our ESSER funding comes from Fund 215. We're required to spend 25% matching funds as part of the summer enrichment program. So we will pull that 25% out of that ESSER funding. It also allows us to have additional staff supports if needed, i.e. a custodial. It supports our hotspots for remote internet access for our students. And it's currently supporting our general fund shortages for staff. So I currently have 3 people funded because we have a shortage in general fund to be able to support those 3 staff members.
And that's because our enrollment dropped. So we kept our staff.
So the ESSER, that came about from COVID, right?
Yes.
That's Federal elementary and secondary.
Emergency relief.
Right.
And then how long till this runs out?
Well, if we continue and not have any enrollment changes, it will run out at the end of next year.
Yeah. Well,
Which
we
is
have,
What
we'll
it
just
was
have
meant
this
to
year.
go through.
It was meant to go through 24.
Oh, it was meant to go another year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but because we are supporting 3 staff members,
Okay.
which is pretty heavy, we'll run out of it next year.
So we have, this is our 1-year advance warning to be watching what's happening with our enrollment and all that, because we will need to make some restructuring plans if we don't see our enrollment come up.
Yes.
But it gives us a year to plan for that.
Runs through 2023.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This-
through the end of next year,
Yep, June 2023.
budget we're looking at.
The other highlight is we are receiving summer enrichment funding. So this is going to fund our summer programs, which supports learning loss. We have been approved for that, and I believe that they're doing high school programs for those students who have had learning loss, who are not on target to graduate, who just require some additional help. We have that program available and have been approved through the state for that funding. Fund 229 is our high school success. We fund an elective teacher out of that. So some of the culinary, I think we have some art classes that we have. It also supports the dual credit tuition. So I believe there's 2 or 3 students that are currently enrolled in high school and Rogue Community College.
Teacher called credit for science.
And that gets paid for out of that high school success program. We have a program called College Dreams that we run. College Dreams supplies us with a person that comes on site and sits down with all of the, I believe, the juniors and seniors. And then helps them walk through college applications, scholarships, puts them on target. So let's say Joey wants to do biology in college. So they'll point him in the direction of what classes that he needs to take in order to be able to fulfill that. And then we have a mentor program that we pay for teachers, mentor program that we get from Southern Oregon ESD.
College Dreams has rebranded themselves in the last year. They're now called Project Youth Plus.
Oh.
You'll hear that referred to. They've been college students for 20 years.
Yeah, forever.
And then they rebranded. I have to always.
The high school success program also supports part of our Character Strong, CIS, and the Acela software. So the Acela software is the credit recovery. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the credit recovery. So if a student's behind, they can get some credit recovery through that. Another big fund that we have is our Student Investment Act. So we currently have 3 full-time equivalent aides funded through that. We have a part-time SPED elementary teacher funded through that. We fund community engagement. So our newsletter that goes out every month, open houses, some marketing, those types of things for community engagement. And then we also are doing some capital projects, which is the elementary campus security is also coming out of that student investment. And then, of course, we have our title funds, which funds 1.5 full-time equivalent aides. And then it also helps support some professional development. We haven't had a lot of professional development happening in the last couple of years, but I see that increasing this year as we get back to being able to be in person and doing some additional.
We have benefited from some ESD grant, regional grants for us.
Yes.
So our positive discipline supports have come through that process.
Yes. So those are some key highlights to some of the funds that we have out there that has helped funding our programs here on site.
What is your sped?
I was wondering that too, Dan.
Special education,
Okay,
yeah,
I have the same question.
sorry. Please, if anytime I use an acronym, please ask me because I have a tendency to use them and forget that somebody may not know what those are. So
As a lay person, you probably wouldn't know,
Yeah.
especially if you have no kids.
yeah, so SPED is special education. So we are funding a part-time special education teacher at the elementary school.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. And FTE, when you're reading this, is full-time equivalent, or yeah, full-time equivalent.
That part I'm familiar with.
I did it the other day to another person and they're like, huh? And I was like, oh, yes.
Okay.
And as a reminder, why we do what we do, and this is to create the successful, productive, and literate citizens who'll be ready for college and or the workforce by learning collaborative creativity, communication, and critical thinking through natural resources. So this is just our mission statement, a picture of random students, showing you why we do what we do. I had been in a class and they had said, don't forget to tell your budget committee why you're doing what you're doing. And this is just a reminder. I can give you numbers all day long, but in reality, these numbers equate to those kiddos. And I want to do everything we can to make sure that the kids that leave here have the opportunities of anywhere in the world. And that's it for the presentation. So if anybody has any questions.
I have a couple of questions
Sure.
on. So the 6.3 million.
What is the revenue by fund? Okay.
That's. How is that tied to our 9.2 biennium?
Oh, the billion. That's the funding for the whole state.
That, yeah.
The 9.3 billion.
So actually,
Oh,
yeah.
I thought that was million.
So actually, the one that you want to look at is the next one that says the general revenue fund, which shows the diagram of it goes left to right. It says beginning fund balance. Yeah, that one down there on the bottom. So that state school fund that says 2,866,357.
Yeah.
That's our portion of the $9.3 billion.
So is this our annual budget? or-
Yes, that's for everything that we have. That is our annual budget, is that $6 million.
Okay, so I believe last year it was like 4 million.
It should have been higher. It would have been higher last year because of
Yeah.
the seismic.
Yep.
Yep. I believe we were at almost
I didn't-
11
I
last
didn't
year.
bring my audit with me. I
Hold
was
on.
Looking at it today.
I can look at last year's.
Might even actually be in your budget.
Because I try to focus on that one number every year.
Yeah.
How much money are we spending?
So last year it was
Last
8,
year.
yeah, last year was 8.899.
Million.
Mhm.
But
It- But it included the seismic dollars.
I've asked, every time I ask this question, I get a different answer.
So,
Look at this page here. I'm gonna go
if
through-
you look at,
I'm on her actual budget, page 8. That's the 1920, 2021 actual. Look at the actual. This is actual, this is actual. This is this year, no. Proposed for the current year and proposed for, oh, it's not here.
yeah,
Oh, this
Yeah.
must be proposed this year. Okay, so look, here we go.
one of the pages,
Actuals.
yeah. One of the pages that might be
Actual.
easier is this one, that's your fund summary
Uh-huh.
page. So this will give you the current year and you will see that it's at 6.5, and I can pull the one from last year to show you right
I
here.
remember seeing
Yeah.
the 9 million.
It's the 8.8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember seeing that, but I was always told,
Yep.
oh, it's about 4.
Normally it is, but we have, you have to remember, we still have the ESSER funding that we have that we don't haven't normally had. So we have
Right.
ESSER funding,
And then our seismic grant.
and then there's some additional, we're finishing out the seismic.
Yeah, I guess I'm showing him the general fund. here.
Yeah,
But as a district, last year, we gobbled up $8 million.
we didn't gobble up $8 million.
We spent 8 million?
No, so you have to remember that that your revenue and your expenditures, when you're doing a budget, have to balance to zero. But at the end of the year, when you look at your audit,
Your actuals.
is your actuals of what you brought in and what you spent. So that, off the top of my head, I don't remember what that audit number is. But the audit is what we actually spent, which I can look at that dollar
But the other
amount.
thing that's inflated is over the last 6 years, we've had 2 large seismic grants.
Right.
And a lot
There's
of-
Federal money that has come to try to
Yeah,
backfill.
I mean, we've had almost $1.5 million in ESSER money. I mean, we've had a lot
Sure.
over the last couple of years that we wouldn't normally have. Actually, Julie and I were having a conversation not too long ago. I think at one point we were closer to the $2 million mark as far as our overall budget. We have, for everything, we've just increased, getting additional grant funding, being able to utilize, when I first started 5 years ago, your ending fund balance, when I budgeted it, was $20,000.
Right,
I'm now saying you're at 230.
right.
And this
So-
year you're moving 800.
But
So
from 8 million, right?
what do you mean from 8 million?
Well, our
That's the
With-
general fund part of the cookie, okay, is where our ending fund balance comes. There's the
Mhm.
seismic money on top of that and the ESSER money, but those are temporary funding streams. So really, it's about that core piece, what's going on there. Now, it's gotten messy because we actually are bigger than our general fund budget because we've used ESSER money also and for
Mhm.
staffing.
I realize there's
Yeah.
several sources of
Mhm.
money coming
That's
in,
why
but-
it's confusing though, because we're actually funding bigger than our general fund right now.
Right,
Mhm.
And the hope is we'll grow our enrollment back, that when the special monies go away, we can still fund it because we'll increase in enrollment and what we get from the state per pupil.
but we're still writing checks for $8 million, right?
No, we are writing, you could say we're writing checks for. I'm pulling the audit from 2021.
When I talk about her numbers around salary and benefits, that is for employees that are in the general fund budget.
Mhm.
So that percentage is not percentage of the whole big piece. in terms of cost.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah. No, I think you're trying to figure out what actually
Yeah.
gets spent
What's
per
the
kid.
cost to stay in business up here?
Mhm.
It runs about $200,000 a month as an equivalent, if you want to think about it.
That's only $2 million for 10 months.
For 10 months.
So
But we issue 12 checks in that 10-month span. And we still have district employees that are working 12 months. We
Sure.
still
that's a
have,
long ways from the 8 million.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's-
But the dilemma we face, and the reason why we pursue grants, seismic grants, is we do not have a bonding capability to do capital improvements to our
Right.
facilities.
Mhm.
So we really have to be strategic in pursuing grant funding that allows us to accomplish, so the seismic is not supposed to give us a new roof, but it is supposed to improve the roof structure. So you got to get a new roof because that's what happens when you do that.
But it's still money being spent here.
Exactly.
It's not being spent somewhere else.
And so you'll find other school districts, Medford, for example, runs their budget and all their stuff, but then they pass a bond on top of it for,
Mhm.
$180 million.
So next year, this 6.3 million.
Probably
that's-
will go down.
We don't have any
So-
budget.
so- That's for 22-23.
for next year.
So what you have to remember is that this is a plan. I am saying that I'm estimating that I'm going to bring in $6.4 million. And I'm also estimating that I'm going to send out $6.4 million.
Okay.
Is that what actually happens? No. It could fluctuate in either direction in revenue and or expenditures.
But in the end, public schools cannot spend more than they have in revenue, so you have to build a plan with
Right.
reserves as shock absorber for that.
Mhm.
But it's gonna be more than 4 million probably, right?
What will be more than 4 million? What
What we
the,
spend.
yes,
So if I understand it, on the last year, we had 800,000 left over.
this 21-22 year, based on the money that we rolled, our actuals that we rolled, what revenue we brought in, and what expenditures we've expended, I'm saying out of all of those three components, that I have $800,000 to move into 22-23.
But
Some
part
of that is still committed, though.
Right.
Yes,
and part of that's because there were certain positions that we didn't fill that were in the budget plan. So not having a full-time principal, not having our
Right.
full-time facilities person, all that.
yeah, we actually, when I went back and looked, we had 10 additional positions last year that I am not funding for this year. Because it was things like we had done a part-time custodian last year. We had done, I actually have it all broke out, but we had an overall 9.63 positions that we didn't fund into this year. A component of that is that there are some people that have left that we haven't backfilled because we haven't had the need for that. Or we had said we need X, and X positions. Well, as we've moved through the year, we either couldn't fill them or realized that we didn't need to have them.
I just.
Yeah.
I guess I'm at the point, is it 7 or 8 million or 4 million that are expenditures, and I think it's on the upper side. I mean,
It depends on what you're looking at. So that $6 million
mhm.
in whole of everything. Now, when you break down each component, like general fund runs about 4 million.
Right.
General, special revenue runs between 1.5 to 2, depending on what you have. And then you have that capital expenditure that we had this last year, which was 2.4 million, 2.3 million. So that those three buckets together make up your 8.8 million.
Sure.
Now, did we spend all of that? No. We've spent the capital projects money because we had those capital projects happening.
Though we didn't spend all of it because we delayed some of that.
Yeah, we haven't spent all of it, yeah, to date. But like general revenue or like general fund, we had, remember I told you that we budgeted for that Oregon paid family leave. Well, I anticipated spending that money, but we didn't spend that money. So that's part of that extra money that we've been able to roll over because we didn't expend
Right.
that money.
So it was somewhere around 700,000.
Yeah, I'd have to look at your board report to see where
Well,
you're at.
If $6.3 million divided by, what do we say, 175 students for the year.
Yeah, but you can't include, yeah, I mean,
If you're talking about the total revenue that
Yeah.
we got and everything, yeah.
Yeah.
This organization spends $36,000 a year per student to exist.
That's what the operational costs
Yes.
are projected to be
That's
next year.
all in the whole bucket.
that's, yeah.
Per student.
But in a year or so, when we're done with our seismic, that number will come down.
Sure,
And when the federal money goes away, it'll come down.
right.
Mhm.
So I realize it's
Yeah.
the seismic kind of weans it out of there.
Seismic, that federal funding that we've gotten for COVID.
Well, you also have title monies on top of all that.
Mhm.
that are outside of that.
Mhm.
I'm
And
just,
title fluctuates too.
but you, I mean, there's always gonna be maintenance or to keep a organization operational.
Yes.
You get, that's all cost.
That's why we talk about a 5-year plan. Like we know that technology happens the minute you bring a new computer or Chromebook in, they're outdated. So we anticipate having to replace those a set every year or 2 sets every year. Or
Textbooks.
textbooks. We know
Sure,
that
that's all.
curriculum changes.
I
Yeah.
just like to know what,
Mhm.
you know, to educate a kid, so times that by 10 years, that's $360,000 per student plus to get them, that's just through 10th grade.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't know what just.
I would have to
it's
say
hard
that
to-
until I
hard to
started the
fathom.
position, I had no idea what it took to run a school. No idea what efforts went in to making sure that our students were educated. And it amazes me when I convert it into something that I understand, such as numbers.
Mhm.
It blows my mind what it takes to educate our students. It's,
Like
It costs.
yeah.
a year for college tuition. That's with housing, more 3 meals a day. I don't know
And
what
that,
it
oh,
is
I need a
anymore,
coffee,
but
Mom. Would you put
but-
money on my account?
It's gotta be in the
I
same
get those
neighborhood
calls.
as the 40,000 that we just saw. So
Mhm.
that's for college education.
Mhm.
Just trying to keep it in perspective. On
Of
how
course.
much money we're going through and how many children are benefiting from it.
Mhm. And the more students you bring in,
Right.
you can drop those dollars
Sure,
because you're
sure.
bringing in more students, because
Oh,
in all
sure.
reality, we do have more space for kids to be able to come in. I mean, I think some of our classes are, however, ideal it is to have 10 kids in a class per one teacher, or 12 kids in a class per teacher. We could go, we have room for a couple more.
Yeah, it seems like the last meeting I looked at our total staff, how many kids we have. Number per
And that's what
staff.
makes us enticing to other people too, is because we do have, you don't become a number. You are a student. My name is Joe, and
Right.
that teacher knows your name. That teacher knows if you're having difficulties. That teacher can recognize certain things
Text your parents.
compared to having these huge districts that you're just coming in and out of class and that teacher has no idea who you are.
And larger class sizes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's-
35 kids a class or
Well,
even more.
there is another value to having a school in this town, that if you remove this school, the family changes this town and who wants to live here.
sure,
So that the investment, the benefit for the community goes beyond just the cost of educating kids.
I
Mhm.
agree. The other question I had was something that several of the parents brought up is our sports program.
Mhm.
And I know we've been struggling with that
Mhm.
for different reasons, but I didn't know if there was much emphasis put on that.
I always, there's always, for every sport, a head coach. There isn't always an assistant coach budgeted, but what happens usually is one sport doesn't play, so
Sure.
it alleviates that particular one so that this sport could have an assistant. That seems to be kind of the ebb and flow of how Butte Falls' sports programs do, but every sport does have a coach that we anticipate for, that we budget for. We budget for a set of uniforms every year, and we also budget for supplies for the particular sports.
So I guess my question would be, and I'm sure, sometimes I heard there just wasn't the kids to put
Mhm.
together a team. Other times I heard there wasn't the coaches.
There's two.
Mhm.
So you need kids, you need coaches.
So is there, how, besides just setting money aside, is there enough money to attract coaches?
The coaching stipends are set by the collective bargaining agreement with our teachers. So the
So-
teacher contract.
So once again,
And I believe they're relative, your coaching stipends are relative to districts your size.
but if we wanted to up it, are we limited?
We are by our contract.
You are by the
With union.
contract.
So the union's limiting,
Well, they're setting it. They probably wouldn't argue if you want to put more money in there,
I
except,
would agree with the statement.
except the interest is in the employee too, and so where are you gonna put your money? I mean, you're bargaining with them, so are you gonna give it to coaches or are you gonna give it to other employees? That's what collective bargaining is. You have to balance that all out.
well, I think it's an example of where our hands are tied. And maybe a higher stipend isn't the right answer, but if we're having trouble getting coaches,
It's more about our location in a rural remote area,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're a coach and you aren't here, then you're driving here, aren't you?
yeah,
Just gas,
right.
just nothing else, just gas.
I mean, it has to be worth their while. Not all, I mean, some coaches do it because they love it, but
Mhm.
eventually it becomes an economical challenge, like you just said, getting them up here. And if we're not.
And
we
that's
don't
why
have the
we,
ability
yeah.
to Offset that, I start getting.
And that's why we have, for the last couple of years, have done the co-oping, because it allows for helping to alleviate some of that, to allow two schools that don't have a lot of students, or two schools that don't
Right.
have coaches, to come together to allow for those students to be able to participate in those programs by sharing the costs of that particular sport.
Right.
And that's why we've looked into that co-oping, to allow for our students to be able to participate.
Is there, I can't think of any ways to attract more kids to go out through a budget. I mean,
No,
I had an idea, pay coaches more, but I don't know how you build your budget to attract. You can't pay. people.
You can't,
But if they don't want to play, they don't want
it's-
to play.
yeah,
but I
you're-
don't know why they don't want to go out for sports.
We have a small high school.
It's
It's kind
smaller
of my
than it has
thought
been.
process,
It has been. Our middle school program's been going gangbusters.
because we have a large principal.
Okay, so it's just number of kids.
I think there's some,
Okay.
I think there's a lot of ebb and flow that I've noticed. So this is number 5 that I've done, I think. And that you can see the ebb and flow of like particular sports, that like one year it's football, then the next year it's track, and then the next year it's basketball.
But I think a
I
lot of
think
that
there's
is
this,
the coach, that coach builds the culture, and then the kids in the
Mhm.
community want to be in that culture, and so I think it comes down to your program, your athletic director, and your coaches.
We also had a really good relationship with Crater Lake Charter Academy, and
Mhm.
that's when our programs were strongest,
Mhm.
because they had kids who wanted to play combined with our kids to keep everyone a good experience. So, I mean, our excellent basketball that we had for several years would not have existed without
Mhm.
CLCA.
But most of the players weren't students here either. I mean, some of them,
Yeah.
there were a lot of them that were, but
Yeah.
a lot of them were. I guess
Well,
that's part of it. You get more kids, more kids want
yeah.
to come.
Mhm.
and having a coach who makes a commitment and builds a program, and successful programs that way. You think of schools around the state where there are basketball schools because there's been stability and certain people will actually move to that area so their kid has a chance to play.
Yeah, because the kids come and go, but the program is
Right.
still there, and
Mhm.
you can tell that the individual in charge builds that. We just really seem to struggle with keeping that momentum here. And so,
As do most small schools,
yeah,
Mhm.
realistically.
In my opinion, because I actually have a kid at high school, like this year's, I don't think we were able to do wrestling or football at the high school.
Mhm.
We had great wrestling for the middle school, but there wasn't enough students interested in doing it. It would have been, like wrestling, it would have been the same coach, correct? In high school or middle school?
Was it,
They weren't allowed to coach ball
Oh,
by
oh,
rules,
okay, it would've been
by
something different.
not our rules. by
I
rules.
think the high school ended up going to the element or the middle school because there was not a program, there wasn't any students.
Okay,
at
so a couple
the-
high school kids
No,
decided to
no,
go.
no, the coaches.
The coach.
Oh, the coach.
The
just switched
coach
to
went
middle.
down.
Yeah, anyways, it
To grow the
It
program.
was
Yeah.
student interest.
Yeah.
And again, like, Becca, how many kids are in your class? Yeah, that's our junior class,
okay.
you know?
And not all 16 of those students are going to play sports.
She would never.
Yeah.
I saw they
Yeah.
had certain people involved in the sports
Mhm.
program, it would lost me. Those
And it
people
could- yeah,
leave,
Those
so
students have
how do we
probably
get those
moved on.
Well, and then when you have a shutdown for a year,
Yeah.
people go and do other things.
Yeah.
So you got to rebuild that adult
It was, yeah,
piece. You know, I mean, that, yeah.
brought up so many times that night. We were sitting here about the sports.
Mhm.
And so-
I meant to go back through my notes about that night, because that was a thing.
And,
And,
but
a
I
lot of
can
those
tell
people, their
you,
kids were involved in
Yeah.
our junior loggers and our middle school. They were parents of those kids.
and I can tell you that your budget supports having the programs. If at
They
the
come.
time those programs come, there is money there to
Right.
support those programs.
Supports it, but doesn't, not enough there to really promote it
Well,
above and beyond. It's
it-
limited.
what it
I-
comes down to is recruiting athletes to your school, and there are rules around that. I mean, realistically, so you
I've
you
actually
serve your
watched
kids.
movies about that.
Yeah, so you serve the
Problem.
kids you have, you try to provide the opportunities that would be attractive to those kids, because those are your kids. And, you know, and that's what we work with.
But if we have kids that want to play and we can't get a coach, I guess my first thought is money. More money if we bring them in. But
I don't think we've had any sports this year that didn't occur because of not having a coach.
Okay.
It occurred because there wasn't enough students.
Not that I heard of.
Okay,
There are people who are willing to help if we get to that point.
okay,
But yeah,
that makes me feel
Yeah.
better. Those are my two big questions. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
Dan, did you have any other questions?
You've answered mine, and I have about 28 years going through this, so there's not too many things I'm not.
Not
Aware.
surprised by. So you have the option as part of your agenda. You can make a motion to approve the budget onto your board. The motion's at the bottom of your agenda, or we can adjourn and have more discussions around it if you'd like.
I'm just gonna be different and say, my recommendation would be to approve it, because you're gonna get another bite at this apple when it comes to the board.
I'm ready for, I'll make a motion, Dan, if you don't have anything more to ask about it, right?
Make the motion.
Okay, so I move to approve the proposed 2022, 2023 budget in the amount of $6,514,045 and set our tax rate at 4.5749 for $1,000 assessed value. Is that property value?
Yep.
Do we have a second to the motion?
All set. All set.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys. I made the motion.
Katie made the motion.
Mark seconded.
Mark seconded.
Unanimous.
All eyes.
I know, I'm like trying to face this way and then Julie's over there. Big room.
So you can motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Dan. All in
Aye.
favor?